service with me. I didn't know who it was. This is my sister Janie. Number 2.
Also known as dinner. Dinner? I did dinner. Oh, hi friends. Hi family. I'm going to talk a little bit about Mum's Jehovah's Witness years. And because of that, there may be some in-house jokes and some small things that people who are not of that faith possibly won't get. Hi to some friends I didn't see before. If you want to know what any of this means after the event, please, there's plenty of people here you could ask. Getting dressed this morning, if I could imagine that Mum was with me having a small conversation, I'd like to say, yes, Mum, my dress is a decent length. Yes, Mum, I do have a petticoat on in case the light comes in behind me and you can see through my legs. And Mum, I know I don't have a hat on, but Mum, I'm not going to lead a prayer. And Mum, I'm not going to do this with a handkerchief on my head. So here I am, appropriately dressed. Everybody who knew Mum knew that Mum was a Jehovah's Witness. She was introduced to Bible study in around about 1951 by our good friend Dana McCaskill's mum, Sister Feeney Butler. And Feeney used to do Bible study with Mum's mother Clara, known to many at the time as Tremmy. Mum was then baptised into the JWs after Barbara was born. She took a time, I think, having a really big think about it, after Barbara was born about 8 years later, 1959. Paul wrote in Hebrews, faith is the assured expectation of a thing hoped for, the evident demonstration of a reality, though not yet beheld. Mum lived her life with that demonstrable faith. And in that week or weeks before Mum passed, particularly the last couple of days, she was in what could be called pain and suffering. And I was looking for something on the morning that she passed away. I was at home, having thought that Rebecca had visited the night before and gone home, not knowing that Rebecca had stayed. And I picked up my Bible. Your JWs will be pleased that I've still got it. And out of the back of the Bible fell this. And on this, you'll be pleased, Ecclesiastes 3, 1-9, people who know it will know it. Revelations 21, 1-4, Psalms 37, 10 and 11. I'll get back to them in a minute. I just thought it was interesting that I'm looking for something to read to Mum, and they're the 3 scriptures that are in the back of my Bible. Mum's faith was in the teachings of the Bible and in the Jehovah's Witnesses' principles, applications and interpretations of those teachings. They were for Mum the evident demonstration of a reality not yet beheld. What she was waiting for and praying for was Revelations 21, 1-4. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the former heaven and the former earth had passed away, and the sea is no more. I saw also the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, and prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. With that I heard a loud voice from the throne say, "Look, the tent of God is with mankind, and he will reside with them, and they will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them. And he will wipe out every tear from their eyes, and death will be no more, neither will mourning, nor outcry, nor pain be any more. The former things have passed away." Mum was waiting. She wanted that to come in her lifetime. And I must admit to having spent most of my childhood with a really firm expectation that it was going to come within our lifetime and within Mum's lifetime. But it hasn't come to pass. But Mum also had a faith in the resurrection, and I won't quote resurrection scriptures to you, but What she was waiting for after the resurrection is the Psalms quote, which is Psalms 37, 10, 11. And just a little while longer, and the wicked one will be no more. And you will certainly give attention to his place, and he will not be. But the meek ones themselves will possess the earth, and they will indeed find their exquisite delight in the abundance of peace. And I think that you can agree that Mum was meek, but there was a little underlying bit of steel there, and a bit of a rod and a bit of a flick with a wet tea towel as well. I remember the sting of the wet tea towel. I remember it. I was. And please, JWs, you probably can feel the irony of the fact that it is me up here doing this. It's a sweet irony, but here I am. We were doing funeral planning the other night, a week's worth of it, and I picked up Mum's little Sing Songs of Praise, the little brown songbook, looking for things that we could play, things that Mum would know. Mum was a great one for taking notes, and her study Bible, there's more things underlined than not underlined, and notes insides of things written sideways, crammed in, little notes everywhere. And she had a very small handwriting, and that also got passed on to my daughter Rebecca. Weeniest little handwriting. She was also ambidextrous, which is why she was so good at the piano. Anyway, if the Bible's up the back, I encourage you to have a look at it because it's a wonder. In the song book, in the very front of it, there were a number of people's names, including, I think, Brother Jevon's name was in the front of that song book. Anyway, also there was Micah 4:5. So it's the only scripture that was written in little tiny print. So, of course, I had to go dig out Micah 4:5, didn't I? And this is a bit of a famous one, but it's worth a repeat read for those of you. And I don't know who Micah was writing to, I just know that it's a good scripture. Come, you people, and let us go up to the mountain of Jehovah and to the house of God of Jacob. And he will instruct us about his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion law will go forth, and the word of Jehovah out of Jerusalem. And he will certainly render judgment among many peoples, and set matters straight regarding mighty nations far away. And they will have to beat their swords into ploughshares, and their spears into pruning shears. They will not lift up sword, nation against nation, neither will they learn war anymore. And they will actually sit, each one under his vine and under his fig tree, and there will be no one making them tremble, for the very mouth of Jehovah of armies have spoken it. For all the peoples, for their part, will walk each one in the name of its own God. But we, for our part, shall walk in the name of Jehovah our God, to time indefinite, even forever. And I think that's a really lovely summation of Mum's faith. So our memories of those days, moving across to the people involved, of course start with Dana McCaskill Butler. And she and the Butlers are my earliest memories. And I just want to, because Mum's passing, I think, is the end of an era. I think Dana said that Sister Ruth Richardson, I don't know whether she's here. Is Ruth Richardson here? No hands going up. Sister Ruth Richardson is still alive, and I think she's the only one that I know of from that era. Dana would probably correct me if I'm wrong. But there are so many names that I'd like to mention, because for the Jehovah's Witnesses here, it was an end of an era, and a lot of the guys here are the children of the people who are Mum's peers. So I'm just going to run down some names, spark some memories, possibly throw in a little comment, because Mum may have been meek and mild at the Kingdom Hall, but there was occasionally a little comment or two that she would throw in about people, as we do from time to time. Never said a bad word about Joe and Feeney Butler. Never a bad word was said. And I myself can remember Joe. The interesting thing is, it was Joseph and Josephine Butler, which is why we had Joe and Feeney. And my earliest memories would have to be Joe's blue eyes, bluest of blue eyes, and half the group of butlers have got those same blue eyes, I would think. That passes along to Dawn, Rosie and Dana. and therefore these girls, and June, and these girls have all lost their husbands, so I think we've got a little band of merry widows now. Maybe they'll start singing. I do have to just make the comment, because Rosie, Mum said this more than once. At Rosie and Norm's wedding, Norm loved Rosie a lot. And when they said, "You can kiss the bride," Norm really did. And did. And did. And it was one of the giggling things that my mother would laugh about for the next, how many years, Ros? 50 years or something since then? Dad made some comment about him taking her tonsils out. But that was one of those things that stuck with our family. I'd also like to acknowledge Bevan's mum, Sister Elsie, and Bevan's sister, Ian. Now a couple of the oldies, Charlie McCarthy. Now that goes back a very long time, and we did have a letter from Brother Charlie McCarthy. I think we brought it, if anybody's interested and wants to have a little read of that, a letter written to Mum in 1958 when he gave Mum a typewriter so that we could learn to type and further the work of God's truth in the world. The lovely little Bert Eckhart. Bert Eckhart's long gone, and the thing I remember about Bert is that he was quite short in stature. He was a World War I fighter pilot, so he had seen his fair share of terror in the world, and he was a lovely old man. Wally Irwin, another blue-eyed wonder, and if Wally Irwin was here today, he'd be up here doing this and not me. The Booths and the McCullochs, the Parnells, Sister Flo Goodman, and Sister Flo, I'm sorry, but Mum thought you had too heavy a hand on the piano. Wasn't good. Not that Mum was in competition with anybody or not prepared to share, but Flo, too heavy. The Stantons and the Greensills. There's a tribe for you. Now I've got to tell you a little story about one of the Stantons. Jimmy Stanton, who I don't think is here today, was an exceptionally good-looking young man. Wasn't he, Deirdre? Or isn't he, Deirdre? And Mum said, quote, "That boy's far too handsome for his own good, and he's going to get himself into trouble." And I think he did. But that's just gossip, and we can't, that's 40 years ago. Harry and Joy Elephantis. The Smiths. Mick and Faye Lanham. Where are you, Faye Lanham? Put your little hand up. There she is. Faye, when we were with Mum, and Mum had dementia, most of you would know, and as time went on, it got worse. Longer-term memories would hold better than short-term memories. That's why she didn't know who we were, and she knew who Faye was. And we would prompt her with people's names to see whether we could get some joy into her life by taking her back to names. And in the hospital, so it was in the last couple of weeks, I was running through names, and I said Mick and Faye Lanham, and she said, "They were very good people. They took very good care of me." So thank you, Faye. The McGregors. The Drurys. Dulcie, I've got another word for you later. I'm coming back to you. The Fallas. Marge Burnham, to whom I was lent out as some sort of surrogate grandchild. I sort of was handed off and given back. Daphne Lynch, who I think was one of Mum and between Daphne and Marge and Shirley Anderson, they were probably Mum's girlfriends, which is the closest thing that I can describe to that. Daphne had a daughter who married somebody I think's name was Livingston. I can't remember. I can remember what she looks like, but not the name. Sawyer, not Livingston. Dennis Sawyer. Don't know where the Livingston came from. The Mercers, the Woodcocks, John and Joy, who named all of their children with a J, so we had a whole family full of JWs. I think they did it deliberately too. The Morrises, Sister Ibel Morris and her girls, Candy, and I can't remember the rest of them. Jo. See, this is a memory. See, she's younger than me. The Littles, Reg and Pat, and if anybody can ever find them, we'd like to know where they are. Here's a name from the past, Bill Gray. The Deans, and I acknowledge Bill, he's here today. The Halls, the McGavins, Diane Potter, Ruth Richardson, Sheila and Rowan Mackenzie, the Morans, Circuit Overseer John Wilson, Circuit overseer, I think Dave Madsen. I remember it's a little man with dark hair. A Dutch circuit overseer whose name was Hans, and he was lanky, a little bit like a movie star, but I can't remember. Danny Kaye. Who? Hubler. Hubler, thank you. For 3 weeks. And if I've forgotten anybody or not mentioned anybody, I'm really sorry, but I can add your name to the list later if you like. So, they were our childhood years within the JWs. Moving forward into just quickly the nursing home times and the people that visited and people that kept in contact with Mum, I'd like to thank everybody that did. I'm aware that Bill Dean came, I'm aware that Dulcie came, and special mention to Dulcie because Dulcie spent much time with Mum in her later years visiting the nursing home. She was at the hospital for us almost every day. And poor Dulcie, on the morning that Mum died, we were all, the family were in the room with her and we were just sitting quietly, as you do, like stunned mullets. And the door opened and Dulcie came in and she didn't know that Mum had passed. And it was a bit of a for poor Dulce when I said, oh, Dulce, Mum's gone. And then Dulcie sat with us for another 2.5 hours and emotionally held our hand, which was just so lovely. So Dulce, you're a trooper. You're a good girl. Mum had a bit of a sense of humour. Do we know this? There are some stories I can't tell. We can tell maybe back at Barbara's over tea and coffee. As she got older, she developed a bit of a liking for the boys. Bev said it was the Alzheimer's. But she responded very well to men, and it was the Alzheimer's. But we used to, my partner Jimmy, who was fairly memorable because of his height and colouring, he used to sit with her and she used to hold hands with him. And we'd give her a bit of a tease and she'd cuddle up to him a bit. And we'd stir her up a bit because she'd stir back. And we'd had moments of clarity and moments not. And one point she said to Jimmy, she said, why is my leg so sore? And Jimmy said, because you were drunk and you fell down. And she took that little breath. She said, I don't drink. And then there was that another 2 little breaths. And then she just turned to me and said, I think you pushed me. And that put him firmly in his place. So, and I think that's a nice way to, remember that passing. So the other book that I picked up the morning that I was looking for things to read to Mum, which I didn't end up having to do, was this, and I just was browsing this for my own benefit more than for Mum's, but I found this and I thought this was a nice way for me to close on a quiet note before I pass off to Dana, who will make us all giggle again because that's what she does. So, this is for Mum, but I think it's for all people. May the blessing and the presence of the Eternal inspire you always. May you have the inspiration to love this world unconditionally with passion and tenderness, and the radical confidence to know that you are more precious than heaven and earth. You were made in heaven. You were made for heaven. You exist to create heaven on earth. You know not your own worth. Sell not yourself for a little price, being so precious in God's eyes. Thank you.
Well, Dana's my name, and I'm nervous, so bear with me. When Janie approached me on behalf of the family, she said, look, would you be able to say a few words? I said, don't be ridiculous. When have you ever known me to say a few words? At least a dozen. So I'll be off in a minute, okay? What was that? Oh, I've got mine. Okay. Now, you're probably wondering what a young chick like me could possibly do talking about a 92-year-old, which Val was. Well, I can assure you, don't let this 30-plus appearance fool you. I am 30 plus, but like there's the 30 and there's the plus. One more? Okay. So our families go back 4 generations. We've been friends, 4 generations coming down. The Butlers and the Brummels, we were known as. Sounds like a bit like a bikie rival groups, doesn't it, getting together? But we were a force to be reckoned with, as Janie told you and Barbara, some of the Brummel traits. And we were pretty much too, because they were hard times, as we were saying before. We had to have coupons to buy food, and so I was a skinny little wretch, but I made up for it. Anyway, we first go back in history to the early 1950s when Mum met Mrs. Trembath, which we respectfully called, but affectionately called Tremmy, as was mentioned. And I used to go up with her. We'd trudge all the way from our place in Enoggera up to Marnie Street, is it? Still call that? And Mum would have the Bible study in the kitchen, and afterwards they'd have a cuppa, and I was allowed 1 biscuit, because that was manners in those days, 1 biscuit. Now it's 1 packet of biscuits, and then the adults have a go. But 1 biscuit, and anyway, she had a piano there, and I was, as a tiny child, I learnt to play on the piano and sing, "I've got a lovely bunch of coconuts." Remember that one? Anyway, so any Tom, Dick and Harry or Mary Jane or Sue that came through the door was subjected to my playing "I've got a lovely bunch of coconuts." So this day, I'd had my 1 biscuit and decided that I would entertain Mum and Tremmy. But the next thing, I was only just getting into it, and Mum comes, gets me by there, takes me and makes me apologise to Tremmy for not asking permission to play the piano. That's why I remember it, because I nursed this cauliflower ear all the way home. And, you know, one doesn't forget those sort of things. But in 1955, Tremmy got baptised at the City Hall. In those days, the whole of Queensland met for our conventions in the City Hall. And my sister Dawn, who's the historian of the family, remembers well that baptism because we made sure we went to it. And in those days, I don't think in 1955 that big fountain was there. Is it St George Square? They didn't have that big fountain. Weren't there shops? Oops, sorry about that, little fella. Weren't there shops where we used to go and get? Yes. Oh, good girl. That's right. That's right. Otherwise, I mean, if the fountain had been there, we might have had the baptism there. And then the paddy wagon would have come and taken us all to the watch house. But instead of that, we got onto buses and we went out to the Ithaca Baths. I don't know if you remember, and that's where the baptism was, and that's where Tremmy was baptised. Now, Tremmy, as you know, had a daughter, Val, and she used to come and sit in on those little Bible studies. She wanted to know what this weird religion was that her mother was getting involved in. And before long, she was hooked. You know, the scripture says fishers of men. Well, she was one of the fish. And she got hooked, and she became a weirdo with us, with the rest of us. And so Jeanette mentioned what a faithful person her mother was, and she was extremely faithful person, but she would be almost the most zealous person I think I ever knew as far as the ministry was concerned. When she found out that her creator, the one who made her, had a name, there was no stopping her. She was going to bear witness to that name no matter what. And the zeal of her is indicated by the fact that she would get a bus. Like in those days, we didn't have 2-car families. She'd get a bus all the way out to Samford. Dawn was telling me she had about 6 Bible studies out there. And that wasn't easy because, like, if you went witnessing, well, that was our rural territory out that way. And you'd march up to the doors doing all the fancy footwork because the cows had been up there before you. So we always reckon we're a little bit taller when we got back from all the lovely fertiliser that we gathered as we did the houses out there. So that's what she was like. She got baptised in 1955, we determined, didn't we, 1955. 1959, because it was a mum, it was 19... Yeah, she was a bit of a slow learner. Well, yeah. Actually, yes, that's right. Actually, she would be one of the most intelligent people that I ever knew. My happy moments was just popping in for a cuppa, and we'd sit around that kitchen table and we'd have deep and meaningfuls till the cows came home. And I probably will get another cauliflower ear for saying this, because I haven't asked permission from the girls, but I must say she did pass that intelligence on to them. You may have noticed with the two people who've just, I feel such a Brumby horse beside them, these stallions. But not only that, she had a wit. And I can speak to any of these girls now, and it's not long before the witticisms are coming through. And that's something that, you know, you don't find a lot. I know when these kids were little, I could go up to them and have a decent conversation, an intelligent conversation with them. Today you say, oh, how was your day? Oh, good. And what did you do? Oh, stuff. And that's the end of the conversation. You just can't get them talking intelligently. Well, that's not everybody. It doesn't include any of your children? Okay, so that's the Val that I knew and her children. And you can pay me later for that. You know, money order, cash. Glenfiddich. Now, she did do one thing that her intelligence sort of let her down a little bit. Where's Faye? Faye, I'll get permission later from you to say this, because I don't want to cauliflower you, so I'm going to get permission to say this. But one time, we used to have this book called Qualified to be Ministers, and it had chapters on, you know, pausing and gestures and handling a microphone properly and that sort of thing. And there was one there on heckling. There was one on pronunciation too, which we called pronunciation before we did that chapter. But this particular one that Val was working on was heckling. I don't know if she knew she was, but she'd gone up onto the platform with her householder, with the Bible and notes and everything. And about halfway through, Mick was the school overseer at the time, and halfway through, Mick goes up and starts tinkling on the piano. Poor Val didn't know what to do. She thought she had to do a song and dance act or something, because was it interval? She didn't know what to do. So not knowing what to do, and the intelligence didn't quite click in, she just picked up her notes and the Bible and a householder, and off they walked. So poor Mick had to come up red-faced and just explain that was actually heckling, because like the brothers were trained that if anybody walked in and said, oh, you're a stupid lot mob, you know, we knew how to handle it. The brothers knew how to handle it. Take out your shotgun. No. But if they, you know, threw tomatoes at you, did you throw them back, or did you take them later for a sanger? I mean, they're the sort of things that you're trained to do with heckling. And so he had to get up and explain there was a difference between tinkling on the piano and heckling. Okay, so that was, I'll apologise and get your permission later for that one. Thanks, Faye. Now, yes. So, oh, by the way, we did call him Maestro Mickey Mouse after that. That's right, Maestro Mickey Mouse, we called him. And I say that because there are 3 mouse stories altogether. So that's the first one. Now, talking about Val and her love, her colour and her vibrance and everything. See this little guy, he's a bit worse for wear, but we decided, we'd been up to Keppel Island or something, we went to congregation up there, and they had made a lot of clowns to help build their Kingdom Hall up there. So we were about to build ours, and the sisters couldn't get there and throw bricks around and mortar and things, so we sort of had a little chat, and we decided, oh, we might do what Yapoon did. We might make some clowns. So that's what we did, and talking about her skills, she sewed her little finger to the bone. I'd go and get all the stuffing and the calico and this, and I got all these vibrant colours, and Val would make these clowns, and some would say, oh, look, they're a little bit outlandish. You know what? They sold first. They were just fantastic. We used to go in, Kathy, my daughter and Emily were the best of schoolmates. We used to go into the markets there at the Riverview and sell them. Kathy loved going because they had a McDonald's there and we had breakfast. But so that's what we did. Now, the second mouse story, we kept coming down a generation now, okay, to when Janie had to look after me. I was pregnant with Scott, and Bevan had to go out to Roma to pick up Mum and Dad. Dad had ended up in the Roma hospital with pneumonia. So she was looking after me. And we had a cat called Peter, a big fluffy thing, who used to love just bringing up snakes and rats and anything he could find, bring it up and show it to us in the kitchen. Well, yes, lets the mouse go. Janie and I don't know how I got up there. I couldn't do it now. You might, but I couldn't. Up on the table, screaming our hearts out. The cat's looking at us as if to say, well, look, I bought you food. Do you want me to cook it for you? You know.